Ladies and gentlemen, welcome in. Hey, I don't know if you guys heard. There's this little thing called the NFL draft that happened last night, and you could rest assured that the Jacksonville Jaguars had something going on. I say that. Not every team had a pick in the first round of the draft, but that's a whole other conversation and a problem that the Duval did not have to deal with. But hey, let me go ahead and bring him in. My personal champion, Travis Holmes. How much fun did you have last night, sir?
Man, I had all the fun. It was a crazy night, man. It was a crazy night full of all the emotions, and I also got to spend it with about 80 other Jaguar fans in the X Twitter Spaces.
Nice.
Everybody freaking out, just watching all the receivers come off the board. But we'll get into it, man. It was a time.
Hey, listen, first of all, I hope someone on that space has had a hug for you when Jared Verse was eventually drafted by the Los Angeles Rams. I know I felt for you, but unfortunately your mocks did not come to pass. But hey, listen, there were plenty of people whose mocks were left torn asunder. The corner wasn't picked up at 17 like a lot of people thought. We'll get into the trade back in a minute with that. I know our guy, Jamal St. Cyr, did not get the big man in Fuaga that he hoped for. I gave him a hug on Twitter. Shouts to him. News 4 Jacks. And a whole lot of stuff happened. I know a lot of conversations we had with T-Wigs last week certainly felt like they came up and came to pass. So props to him and Locked On Jaguars for helping us and prognosticate that, how you say, I won't call it prediction, but logic. Yeah, how about that? And but yeah, let's start with this. The thing that happened first is what I'm going to address first was the trading back 17 to 23. Now, at the time, have to admit, I was in the camp of hated it. I've been in the camp of goodness for how many weeks now, Travis, that I don't think they should move. I think they should stand pat. I think they should bolster. Ironically, the lineman on the panel thinks that they should have bolstered their DB core over wide receiver. Instead, Trent Baalke trades back, gets to 23. But what's the key piece in your mind, Travis, that makes this a successful trade?
Well, it's the fact that they got multiple mid-round picks. Obviously, 2 next year. What was it? A third and a fourth in 2025, and a fifth this year. I believe it was 167. That's pretty solid just to move back and still have the same or a similar group of guys that you were looking at 17. Because again, the top 3 receivers were already gone. You had like none of the defenders you truly were considering as your number 1 pick were taken at the time that you were picking. So you were basically, this is almost like having the number 2 or number 3 pick in the draft, and if you want to look at it from that perspective.
When you say defenders, I thought Quinyon Mitchell and Arnold were both still on the board, though.
Correct. So what I'm saying is, none of them had been taken, so they were still on the board. They were still available. So at that point, I'm like, well, goodness gracious, this is getting wild. Like, this is getting something serious. Like the fact that it's been all offense all the time, and you were at pick 17, and the only ones that's been taken at that point was Latu and goodness gracious, well, Latu and Verse, right? Yeah. So at that point, I'm like, all right, so this is almost akin into very many other drafts having you have the best choice of maybe the top 2 corners. You have an option between having one of the realistically one of the top defensive tackles available. I mean, I know Murphy was gone, but you still had Newton on the board, who's also still on the board, oddly. You had a lot of options available there. So to be able to still move back just 6, 7 picks and still have that same general group of guys available for you is a great process. I mean, you know me, I'm always going to criticize when I think it's worth criticizing. I'm always going to champion when it's worth championing. And this process is the best I've seen from Trent Baalke.
Well, I'll say this. The part for me that assures that this was a good move in terms of value, I might have questions about this particular choice. I mean, I know we talked a lot with T-Wigs last week of Locked On Jaguars being about Quinyon Mitchell being his pick. You and I both know he would have run to the podium at 17 and gotten that done. Also, considering how few defensive players were drafted to that point, maybe a lot of the opinions we had during the week would have opted to trade back, as you said. And I believe that Quinyon Mitchell was still available. One in the Lions he eventually fell to, right? So I feel like there might be some philosophical dissension. But to your point, if as it's alleged by Trent Baalke himself, actually, that Brian Thomas was always the pick at 17 to jump 6 picks back, right? Essentially a fifth of the draft,
Right.
and still get the guy you wanted. To me, that's where the victory is. We can argue about whether it was the right guy. You at least got value from it. No, more bites of the apple, as has been said, right? I think at least in
Yeah.
that book he should be given props. But so with all that in mind, well, let's get into Brian Thomas. Let me get hip like the cool kids. Let's see BTJ.
Okay.
Holmes, first of all, your thoughts on the prick, your thoughts on the pick, and why you think it'll work.
My thoughts on the pick is it's going to take a little bit of time to get him up and going, as far as give him some great NFL coaching. So wide receiver coach for the Jaguars, Chad Hall, is going to get his hands on him, going to shape him, going to mold him, get him into the playbook and all of that. Uh, so BTJ, I'm a general fan of the pick, and that at the time of the pick, I wasn't as happy because, frankly, I was all in on the top three receivers. And if it wasn't the top three receivers, I had this mold in my mind that I wanted to be someone like a speed demon, um, who can be plug and play and running all the routes, more like a Calvin Ridley. That's not BTJ, and that is okay. But he is different in some ways. So we were going to actually get into that. But I like the overall pick. He has a speed, he has the acceleration, he's explosive, he has a crazy catch radius, and tracks the ball like no other in this stack of receivers. But he did have a limited route tree at LSU. He was inconsistent at beating press coverage, and he was really inconsistent in catching the ball in traffic. He was a lot of people saw him as just that vertical guy. So I'm looking more to them getting their hands on him, trying to mold him, and getting better at that intermediate area, and just being a little bit better at using his strides and size and his strength to win, beating that press coverage, kind of things like that. But overall, great, solid. I got to give it like that B plus range, and it pushes it to the A range when you talk about all the winning that they did on the actual value of the picks in the drafts.
Yeah, well, and so to get into it, like his impact is, like you said, to be that contested catch guy. You have some graphics and stuff. Let's go over those real quick here.
Right. So the one concerning thing for me was always everyone kept saying, I mean, look at his numbers, look at his numbers. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, look at his numbers, but look at the tape. Like that was a weirder part about it because his numbers against good secondaries was kind of problematic. I just want to be honest about that. He had a rough game against Bama. He had a rough game against Auburn. He had a rough game against Missouri. And even in the FSU game, while it looked like he had a good game, quote unquote, he didn't have a good game. A lot of that was just the empty yards late in the game when it was, basically over. So just to be honest about that, that was problematic. So that's concerning at minimum. But that's not to say he's not going to be a great player because again, it takes a team to win a game, etc. But nevertheless, that is something that he's going to have to get over because you're going to see NFL talent every week in the NFL. However,
SEC talent, NFL talent, but you repeat yourself. Continue.
basically the same thing. But so I've seen everyone. I've seen a lot of the national guys. I've seen even some local guys kind of have some comps for him, and I'm like, well, that's not what the tape supports. So I've seen Chris Sims saying that BTJ he's AJ Brown, and I'm like, in what world? Based on what tape?
Are
What are
you
you
implying Chris Sims made a bad analysis? For sure.
The only thing that they have in common is the fact that when they get vertical, that they are great contested catch receivers vertically. Sure, they're similar in that way, but not in very many other ways. So Brian Thomas Jr. in his route tree, he is great at going deep. He is great at obviously the 9 route. He's really good at the corner route, out routes, and curl routes, things of that nature. A little bit of opportunity needed on the dig routes and the post routes and things like that. But again, he is in that top tier with all the players you want to be associated with as far as his contested catch rate within this draft class. However, he is not the greatest as far as his separation if you're looking at just the rest of this draft class in comparison. So obviously you have someone like a Xavier Worthy that's at the top of that list, and the Ricky Pearsall, a lot of those guys, and Brian Thomas Jr. is just above. Brian Thomas Jr. is just above Keon Coleman as far as that's concerned. And shout out to Daniel Griffiths from the Jaguar Report. He put out that tweet, and that was a big one for me. So he's not the separation guy, and again, that's fine. He's not that guy. He's not that intermediate guy currently. He may be that guy in the future, But what he is, again, he's that contested catch guy. He is that red zone guy. He's the guy that you're going to give those opportunities to in the red zone, and he's going to capitalize on them. And that's significantly important for this team because this is a team that we've have highlight videos of drops by multiple Jaguar receivers in in the end zone. I mean, we're talking 10 plus drops just last season from plays that should have been made at the back of the end zones. Drops by Zay Jones, drops by Calvin Ridley. I know that was a big thing. Probably they're probably playing that thing on the loop in the Trevor Lawrence negotiations. So now you have a guy who is good at catching these deep balls, who is good at catching these red zone plays, like these red zone snaps, and that is worthwhile because now you're right. Like if you see on this chart right here, you're in that same category with the DK Metcalf, with the Drake London, even with Gabe Davis. You with Michael Pittman. With these are the guys who you would say he is comparable to. Like, and that maybe his ceiling is someone like that DK Metcalf, but I would say his floor is probably closer to someone like that Martavius Bryant. But definitely not AJ Brown because he doesn't have that intermediate, strength of hands that he doesn't
Yeah.
have that route tree just yet. But overall, again, it's a great pick, and it's going to really come down to that development. So they say they want to be a draft and develop team. All right, show me because this is going to be your opportunity right here. So he may be okay a contributor in this first year, or I would hope he explodes, but that shouldn't be the expectation walking in until they can try to get him, gauged and figure out what he's going to be able to pick up and how quickly he's going to be able to explode.
So you've been critical of Chris Sims comp,
Mhm.
which obviously is the correct call that he's wrong. But you mentioned DK Metcalf. Walk us through the similarities you see there.
Well, that's the thing. That's their strengths, like as far as their height, as far as they're close enough on the weight. As far as the fact that they are both really strong at contested catches, they're really good at getting those opportunities within those contested catch opportunities, but they're not necessarily always going to be the ones who get the yards. We don't need that. That's fine. Like even in Seattle, he didn't need that. In Jacksonville, we don't need you to necessarily be the yards guy. You may be that boom bust guy as long as you can if you give me 10 touchdowns and I don't know, 900 yards, 800 yards, something like that, that's still a successful season. I don't care if you're a 1,000-yard receiver. If you can give me touchdowns, because that's what matters. And that's what this team was missing last year.
Well, and so I mean, here are my questions. Like you do comp him to DK Metcalf, which I mean, it's obviously closer than AJ Brown.
That's a
I would,
ceiling.
yeah,
Let's be clear.
I would make the nitpick that I mean, you could confuse DK Metcalf for a tight end, how big he is. He's got 30 more pounds on BTJ, but I don't want to harp on
Yes,
that. You're looking at it for what the role he's playing.
correct.
I said that for the people out there who are going, but DK Metcalf's so much bigger. We know. We're talking about the role he'll play in the offense. And this is here's the thing. You're mentioning a boom and bust situation. I call this kind of guy a lottery ticket, for example.
Okay.
If the number hits, it's a touchdown because he's that kind of size. But for my money, we know that Zay Jones is already on the roster. You and I are at a little bit of an impasse on how Zay Jones was a problem. You feel like he was a drops machine. I feel like he was asked to make a lot of tough catches and
Whoa.
made a number of tough catches that are forgotten because of how much time he missed.
Drops
So
machine was way too far to the right on that one. Goodness gracious. I did not think the man was a drops machine. The man had
I
a
thought
rough
he
season.
usually was.
Yeah, compared to what he normally was doing, what we're used to seeing in 2022. Yes,
Mhm.
he was a problem. I think that's fair to say at bare minimum. He was obviously injured. He obviously wasn't himself. Yes, he did have a lot of drops, and yes, he had a lot of close misses in some critical opportunities. Absolutely.
In some difficult opportunities. I think the
Critical
degree of
and difficult.
difficulty is where I give him kind of a pass. Like he was asked to bail out a situation. Sometimes he did, and sometimes he didn't.
And unfortunately, I'm not giving anybody a pass. That's coaches, that's players, that's across the board because I don't think we're in a position to do that. So it's things that I understand your general point because I'm a Zay fan, but at the end of the day, I'm just comparing what I see on the field, and those catches are expected because that's the role that you play. And
Well,
if you're brought in to be that contested catch guy and you're not making those contested catches, I know it's close, I know it's the NFL, I know it's tight, I get it. But if that's your role and you're not succeeding in that role, then we're going to have to go out and find a guy to play that role. That's kind of what happened with Zay Jones and Gabe Davis.
I hear all of that. Here's what I read though, and I've really only started to put this together lately. I should have brought this up a month ago when you first started talking about contested catch guy
Yeah.
being a target at wide receiver, which again on paper sounds great. any team wants a contested catch guy. Like, listen, it's the same for quarterbacks too. When they show that highlight tape, what I look at is it's kind of the same for quarterbacks. When you see the highlight tape, are they making catches that are wide open, right? This is why Michael Penix's tape, for example, is more impressive than Drake May's. All Drake May's tape, all I see is wide open dudes. Meanwhile, Michael Penix, may he rest in peace. I think his career is going to die in Atlanta. It's not his fault. But in Michael Penix's tape, all those are contested and the ball is put in the right place. Rome Odunze jumping up and getting stuff over fools when Penix was in trouble and making a play. And I feel like there were elements of that in Thomas's film, to your credit. Here's where I have a couple questions. One, on the other side was Malik Neighbors, who obviously went well earlier in the draft, rightfully so. Hey, who knew that both New York teams can make a decent pick, right? I'm just saying. But the punchline being this, with Malik Neighbors on the other side, how much did that lead to him having good production from an alleged Heisman Trophy winner? I would have given it to Penix, but Heisman Trophy winning quarterback in Jaden Daniels, how much of that was part of the brew? How much of that gave him that opportunity to produce? They don't have necessarily that threat across the field like Malik Neighbors at an NFL level here in Jacksonville. And I mean, make the argument that maybe even Calvin really wasn't that. But the punchline being, we're back to that place where we're going to be asking Doug Pearson still to kind of pencil whip a guy open. And if you're facing contested catches, Travis, that means the pencil whipping is not working quite as well.
But I'm okay with that. But to be clear, I'm okay with that, though, because that was a prop. Like, it's okay if the pencil whipping isn't always going to work, because guess what? I'm always been a believer of Jimmy's and Joe's over X's and O's. Like, I've always been a fan of sometimes your guy's just going to have to win. We talked about that in the playoff game when we were in the press box with everybody else saying, hey, man, these guys are just going to have to win. On occasion, your plays just aren't going to beat it when you get into these situations when it gets tight and it gets to the playoffs and it's going to be man-on-man coverage, press coverage at the line. You have to beat the guy across from you. They're double covering your best receiver. What are you going to do? Like, that's the situation where I don't care what play you call. Is your guy going to win? So so in this situation, we have finally given Trevor a guy who is able to go above and over guys, who is able to go and just burn you down the field if he gets 2 steps on you, or if he gets even with you, he's actually past you, in the words of Steve Smith. You have a guy who has that potential. Cool. I'm okay with that. And that's what I mean. Like, at the end of the day, Doug's not going to always be able to pencil whip guys. We saw a little bit of that last year, especially if you have injuries in the wide receiver room. But if you have a guy who can just change that for the defense, they'll run you out of this defense. I'm a fan of that, and I'm okay with that.
And there were examples of Joe's rather than O's handling the business. I mean, look at the Buffalo game. Look at Nolans, I think, was a great part.
Yeah.
Those are 2 games I think that are the foremost example of O's and Joe's getting it done. Perhaps defensively, that was the case for the Jags and the Steelers win as well. Like, I can make that argument. But my punchline being, if you have that skill set in the room, to me, I feel like you just drafted another Zay Jones that we're not sure is another Zay Jones. Okay.
I would argue that this is a better Zay Jones at bare minimum, but not to say you needed another Zay Jones. Because I think his floor might be lower because Zay's still a professional athlete. Like, he's a veteran athlete who knows.
And to be clear, I don't want to go too far down this road because I don't want to discount the future aspect of it. Because the best argument against what I'm saying is the business argument, and that you will not be paying Zay Jones the following year. and listen, we could talk about prognosticating. Ray Charles could see that Zay Jones's time with this franchise was probably nigh, unless something changes, right? We don't even know what's going to happen with Christian Kirk. Those are both completely different questions that are going to be coming up a lot in 25, I'm sure. But
so let's look at this from a different perspective, if you don't mind, because I see how you're setting this up. But go ahead.
The punchline, yeah. I feel like today, talent wise, as a core, the receivers did not get better,
and that's where we disagree. And again, I'm not this fanatic fan of the pick, to be clear, because
Yeah.
I
You
didn't.
like it better than I do. That's all you
Let
said.
me be really clear. I was not a fan of the pick when it happened. I took 4 hours writing articles, looking at more tape, trying to figure out how I truly felt about it after circling back to it. Because originally, after watching, I don't know, an hour of maybe his highlights and game clips, I didn't like the pick up front. This is before the draft even occurred.
So, Travis, when
Afterwards,
you're saying writing articles, you mean at bigcatcountry.com, right?
at bigcatcountry.com, we have the right. We have the post, the goodness gracious, the Trent Baalke and Doug Peterson draft post draft availability. We also have the media calls on bigcatcountry.com as of 7 a.m. this morning. Go and look at it.
This is how I know that Travis has got used to being a media man. He's calling it an availability and not a conference. That's proof of experience, my friend. Continue.
Yes. But after looking at, I don't know, again, I went to bed at 3 o'clock this morning. After looking like another 4 hours of tape, I'm just like, all right, cool. I see where they're going with this. They may not have gotten quote unquote better, but in how they run their offense, I think they've gotten different. And I think they've gotten better in how they've gotten different. Now, hear me out. Hear me out.
I will. I just don't see it yet. You're helping me, though. You're helping.
No. I got you. I got you. So they've gained Gabe Davis. They needed someone because this is Jaguars were the fourth.
You needed height at the very least. I got you.
Not just height. They needed guys who would attack the seams of the field, who would attack the middle of the field, because the Jaguars attacked the middle of the field at the fourth lowest rate of any NFL team in 2023 and 2022. This was actually an issue over both seasons. We just never talked about it in 2022. Insert Gabe Davis.
Brought it up to your credit.
Yeah, I brought it up, but yeah, nobody else is talking about it because y'all are late. Whatever.
That's why you're on the show, so you can help me. Listen, student of the game is a clever nickname, and it's also accurate.
So then you add Gabe Davis, someone who is known for attacking his teams vertically, but more importantly, someone who is known for attacking teams vertically up the seams. Boom. Cool. That's great. Then you add another receiver in BTJ, in Brian Thomas Jr., who is able to attack the defenses down the sidelines vertically. And I know that was a role that Zay Jones held. However, with Zay Jones' inconsistency with being injured last season, that opened up an opportunity. Not to mention, I would also argue that BTJ's ceiling, his potential ceiling, is higher than what I see. That what Zay Jones is more likely to be is what he is at this current moment in time.
Mm-hmm.
You add that fact that you know who Evan Ingram is and you know who Kirk is. These are two guys who's going to eat up underneath. Now you open up the underneath for them because now you have not one but two vertical threats. The addition of Gabe adds to the seam. The addition of BTJ adds to the sideline, and now you can let those two truly eat because teams aren't going to be able to double those two. And if they do, you make them pay for it, hitting them over the top to those two seam receivers. That is why you make it work. If you run your offense that way, because the Jaguars historically have, they just haven't had the second guy to do it.
So what I'm hearing you tell me is they're building a blueprint to essentially do it in a poor man's 49er style, meaning you have guys who are good at several positions, but nobody who's particularly great and would eat up the contract of, let's say, a now Calvin Ridley with the Titans or a Stephon Diggs in Houston. So, and granted, the Titans and Texans are both leveraging the advantage they currently have with brand new, essentially, quarterbacks. I know Will Levis is technically his second year, whatever, brand new. Okay. Whereas Trevor is inches away, is currently negotiating the extension. We'll put it that way, right? So, you're getting in guys who are cost effective that Trevor will be asked to elevate. And let's be clear, Travis, there have been times for all the turnovers he did have and where he was imperfect due to injuries, due to, still getting some of the young kinks out from still recovering from life under Urban Meyer as a rookie, for certain O-line issues, all of those bullet point things that we've been talking about. Trevor Lawrence has elevated this team at times despite injury. And listen, I know it's not an offensive issue, but when the DBs started dropping like flies, that's when they really began to struggle. Everybody seems to be forgetting that. But to that point, I see where you're at. They were looking to replace Zay Jones to, kind of make better their cap situation. I'm going to be really curious to see what they do with Kirk. I'd like to see him finish in Jacksonville for personal and football reasons. It's just a matter of whether he'll take the appropriate money as he twilights in his career.
Right. I believe he would. I believe he will. We'll see. On that restructure.
his personality fits fits that profile. I definitely agree with that.
Right. But I believe this will open up the Jaguars' vertical passing game, which is something that we just haven't seen very much of. Like we can probably put on one hand the amount of vertical passes, 50+ yard passes in the air that were like touchdowns, and one of them is probably the Zay Jones post route, against the Chargers. We can all remember that's just how infrequent we've seen these successfully, not pass interferences. I mean catches for touchdowns. So this is an interesting thing because if it hits, it will hit well.
So and let me jump in the comments real quick. First of all, Robert doing the thing again. Appreciate the LFG from a comment at the beginning of the show. Matt, props, respect. And this is a point he brings up to kind of support BTJ at the combine. Thomas proved he can run crisp routes when asked and kind of look like Ridley. I'll say Ridley-esque, sure. But I felt like Ridley too was that lottery ticket player in Jacksonville. Let me be clear, and that's the point of his. Yeah, the point I'll make is Ridley was unhappy with the exclusivity of his role. He was basically doing one thing, right? A rookie may not have that same, how you say, opportunity or awareness to complain about that quite yet too.
Well, that's the thing. The way that LSU used Brian Thomas Jr. is mostly the same way that Ridley was complaining about being used. So if more likely than not, he's going to be happy about being used the exact same way that he was used in college, whereas Ridley was like, I want to be moved around more, right? Understandably, rightfully so. So this may be a situation where the fit is simply better because this is what I'm used to, and that's fine. So he might be happy just being that ISO route guy.
And maybe here's where my problem is. Maybe I'm looking at this too much like he's just a Zay Jones replacement. Maybe his evolution is to be a Calvin Ridley replacement. I don't know.
I don't know that he's going to be a Calvin Ridley replacement, and I think that'd be an unfair expectation to be placed on him. I think that's not what he's going to be.
I'm not saying that's the expectation. I'm saying that's a level he might reach potentially.
One day, but again, I think this might be just open. This might be a difference of opening the Jaguars' offense up to a more of a vertical attack because again, Calvin was not known as the vertical guy. What was Calvin known for? Calvin was known for speed outs, catching that 15-yard out, getting out of bounds, comebacks, trying to attack you deep, but more often than not, it was going to end up being a pass interference situation. This guy might actually catch it and take it to the house. And that's important. That's what's most important.
To at least have presence to stretch the defense vertically is what's important. And to make NT great again. To your argument, I see an element of that too, tactically. And maybe this is what will enable pencil whipping to be great again in and of itself as well, up here in the future. A great point here that Robert makes. Kirk makes difficult look easy. He's absolutely right. Listen, if we will be glad to host an entire podcast of Kirk standing, Travis and I.
Yes,
we don't have enough time for that. So
today, right now, we are a pro Christian Kirk podcast. We need to make that known up front. That is one of our favorite interviews in the locker room.
Yeah, no doubt here. Closing minutes here. This is a statement I want your opinion on because it's interesting. Is the floor DJ Chark sealing Ridley's good year?
So I said this I said this tongue in cheek on Twitter, Travis D. Holmes on Twitter, when the draft pick happened, because they are really, really similar in a lot of ways, and as far as DJ Chark and Brian Thomas Jr., because they're both LSU wide receivers, they're both 6'3", they both ran a 4.3 40. They have essentially the same vertical. Even actually, DJ Chark's vertical was 2 inches higher than BTJ, and nevertheless, we all know DJ Chark did not play physically. He was not that contested catch guy, even though he had the athletic profile to be one. Mm-hmm. Like what did Urban Meyer say? Looks like Tarzan, plays like Jane. Whatever I need you to play, something along those lines. I can't remember the exact quote, but it was something like that. He wanted him to play tougher, and that's not what DJ Chark was known for. But to Robert's point, athletically, profile wise, yes, they are very, very similar, while not being similar at the same time.
Yeah. Robert clarifies he meant the good year by Ridley in Atlanta. And that's kind of what I'm saying too. Like that's a very high ceiling. Again, to Travis's point, not an expectation, but a ceiling. Granted, listen, it's not as bad as with Tank Bigsby last year. I would have preferred a corner get drafted. Last year was Joey Porter Jr. This year, seeing Arnold or Quinyon Williams be that guy. I think the DB core depth is a lot bigger issue than the wide receiver core depth personally. Right. But again, to your point, and you're kind of having me come around, I still have some questions, but listen, maybe we'll see some things in camp and training camp that'll kind of fix that up. But
again, I might be wrong. I might be wrong on all this.
Hold on. But it's the potential for an offensive upgrade is there. You got me closer to that. Hey, listen, for a minute, Shipley had me, John Shipley, editor of Jaguar Report at minicamp, had me feeling better about Bigsby than I first did. And then all doubt was removed. But I'll say what I said about this pick last night on the NBS Media Draft Show, Bing. I came on as a guest late, and when they asked me about this pick, I said, maybe it's a good sign for the Duval devout, because I feel the same way about this that I did about Anton Harrison last year. It's the right position. I don't know if it's the right guy, but you've shown me enough to see a path to where it makes sense. Do I think he has the same impact as Anton Harrison on the offense? No, but I think there is a significant upgrade there. There's a potential starter coming out of it, and that's what you're looking for in the first round. Anyways,
I think I agree.
Yeah, we could do another 45 minutes, I think, on this, but we're over 30 already. Tell the people where you could be found.
I can be found in all of my writings covering the Jacksonville Jaguars on BigCatCountry.com. You can also find me here every Friday at 11 a.m. covering your Jacksonville Jaguars, talking about all this chaos about how Trent Baalke is cooking in all of his process, whether you agree with the pick or not. And you can also find me on Inside the Pigskin, South Sports Exchange, Pundits on the South Florida Tribune, all their podcasts all throughout the week. If you need me, you can catch me, Travis D. Holmes, on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, etc., all the socials. Appreciate you.
Of course. Hey, honor, joy, and privilege to have everybody aboard. Thanks to Robert. Thanks to Vike Steele in the comments. You're asking about how we feel about the Jags trade. I would encourage you to head over to Sir Toba Media YouTube page, the Sports Den YouTube page, the Huddle Up YouTube page. Watch the beginning of the show. We talk about that a bit in depth there too and knock that out the park. So check that out as well. Of course, I am Kyle Nash, the student of the game. You can find me on Twitter at the SOTG. Find me on Instagram, Threads at the SOTG, as well as the student of the game on Facebook. Check out my writings with the Jaguar Report, the Black and Gold Banneret. I have draft profiles on the Black and Gold Banneret. What is that about? I don't know. Sure, it's just John Rice Plumlee and Tylen Grable, but hey, maybe Tylen Grable becomes a Jaguar. You don't know. It's a thing. Round 6 or 7, I'm saying. But and of course, check out my work covering the Orlando Magic with A7VN Sports and the 3-point conversion, as well as the Student of the Game podcast, where, listen, there's going to be a lot of NBA playoff talk, a lot of NFL draft recap this coming Wednesday. Make sure you get your share of that as well. An honor, joy, and privilege to have everyone aboard. I'm looking forward to the next pod already, like yes. I don't normally already, but this. I want to see if Travis is ecstatic or an old man or as a grown man crying.
Rounds 2 through 4, man. You got to hit. Let's go.
It can still go either way. But until next time, everyone, class dismissed.